time, my name is Scarlett Lewis, and I am the founder of the Choose Love movement. I am so happy to have you all here. I meet really amazing people on my journey and in my mission to serve our educators and students and parents. And I had a dear friend of mine who is a superintendent in New Jersey introduced me to Nadine, and it was an absolute godsend. And so, of course, I want to introduce her to the world. I'm so excited that she's here. So I'm going to read a little intro bio, and then I'm going to turn it over to Nadine. Nadine Miles is a physician assistant, a certified functional medicine practitioner. We're going to talk a lot about that tonight, and the owner of Soul Minded Integrative Health, a health consulting and health educating company. She is passionate about helping others learn how to live consciously by making more informed decisions about how they utilize their life force energy. She works with clients to identify root causes of their illness through a systems-based approach. Nadine lectures widely to professional organizations and leadership teams on topics of wellness, detoxification, stress management, and mindfulness. The personal mastery nurtured through soul-minded living fosters professional development and team cohesion, helping to improve individual and team outcomes. Nadine joined Choose Love because she believes that teaching others how to live right and make healthier choices can lead to a future where being loving towards oneself and towards others is simply a natural phenomenon. Boy, do we want to live in that world. When we choose love, every being can flourish, and that's what we want for everyone on this call. Thank you so much, Nadine, for joining us tonight.
Yeah, I feel like I want to do like a pep rally call after that. I'm so excited.
We've got Hawaii in the house. We have New Hampshire. All right.
Well, welcome everybody. My name is Nadine Miles, and I am very excited to be here talking with you today. I think we're just going to get right into it because I have a little bit more about what I do just within the presentation. So I think what I'll do is share the screen at this point. And hopefully that's good. Does that work for everyone?
It's great.
So what we'll do is I'm going to go through, and then we'll do a little question time at the end of the webinar. But if there's anything that's like this burning question that has to be answered, go ahead and I guess you could either raise your hand or type it in the chat, and I'll make my best effort to kind of get into that with you. So today what we're going to do is we're going to talk about what's the relationship between living soul-minded and choosing love. And the truth is, by the end of today's talk, you're going to realize that they're very much, they're cousins, they're sisters, they're brothers, they're related in that when we choose to live in a more conscious way, inevitably, your health improves, joy comes in, vitality, energy, confidence just finds its way in. Just simply when we make small little incremental changes toward healthy living. So very quickly, I just want to introduce myself and say that, I mean, Scarlett did a fantastic job. There's no more left to say, but that this is who I am. My name is Nadine, and I am the owner of Soul Minded Integrative Health, which is a company that serves to educate professionals and individuals on how to live more healthy lifestyles. And so let's kind of get into what that means exactly. So a lot of people say to me, what is functional medicine? What is it? Like, what do you do? And the answer to the question is basically by answering what traditional medicine is. So traditional medicine is a very linear concept, right? You have some type of issue, and I am going to provide a solution for you. There's a problem and there's an answer, and it's linear. Whereas functional medicine is much more global in its approach, okay? Functional medicine utilizes the entire system, and they use every system's biology base in order to identify what the root cause of the issue is. And functional medicine utilizes the view of the whole integrative person, right? It's not just what your illness is, it's what kind of childhood did you have? And what's your, oops, where did that go? And what is your state of health right now? What's your emotional state of health? Do you live alone? Do you live with people? Were you breastfed? Were you C-section or vaginally birthed? So we look at the whole picture. And the functional medicine concept is that one condition can have many different causes, and one cause can have many different conditions. So I mean, I love it. I think it's great. I have so many people that come to me and say, I'm at every single doctor, all of my labs are normal, but I still feel terrible. What is it? And, you know, it just takes a little bit of sleuth work, a little bit of exploration into the individual to kind of understand what the issue is. So I guess the question we're going to ask today is, how can we choose love by living soul-minded? And I think you're going to start to maybe get a little annoyed with me by the end of this webinar, because every time I ask a question, I answer it with another question. And so the answer to this question is that we have to explore our inner landscape, right? So the answer to that question is, through emotional inquiry, we're gonna kind of get to the end of that, to the answer to that question. So throughout this whole next period of time that we're together, I really want you to think of yourself as an explorer of your internal emotional landscape, and look for a new shift in perspective. Now, one of the cornerstones to the soul-minded living concept is that everything that we are, every component, every facet of ourselves is basically adaptive, okay? And it's adaptive based on the environment that we live in. So we have adapted over the course of 2 million years, certain adaptations, like, for an example, opposable thumbs, right? For an example, walking upright. Another really overlooked example of adaptation is that the lungs are adapted to oxygen, right? The lungs have this expectation that oxygen is going to be present when a child is birthed onto this planet. And we have evolved into that. We have adapted into that. And so we also adapt on the basis of what supports survival. Now, in our modern world, we do that in the same exact way, but oftentimes these things tend to emerge in the presence of coping mechanisms. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. The other big concept is that everything is a process, right? There's no quick fix. There's no one solution. It's a small decision every single day. It's a small decision every minute of every day. And that's what produces results. That's what shifts perspective. That's what kind of leans you back into health. So it's like one of those things where you're climbing a mountain, you're going for a hike, and you're just walking one foot in front of another. Then after 2-3 hours, you turn around and you look and you have, 4,000 or 5,000 feet of elevation. You didn't even notice that happened. So that's the gains that we're going to make, slow and steady, one by one. Now, today, the statistics report that approximately 50% of the population reports sadness, anger, stress. People are distracted. People are unregulated or dysregulated. They're overextended. And people are feeling a lot of depression, a lot of mental health, right? And health statistics are showing that there's an increase in autoimmunity, there's an increase in cancer, an increase in diabetes, increase in obesity. These are chronic diseases that we're seeing at higher rates. So we have to kind of ask this question, what is causing this? What is driving this? Because even though genetics does play a role in the health of the individual, these changes, these shifts, these patterns that we've seen, these sharp increases really have only taken place over the past 50 to 70 years. And the truth is, genetics don't change that quickly. So the question is, what's going on in our environment? What is going on in the environment, in the direct culture that we are submerged in, that is promoting some of these stress-related health illnesses, health issues? So I think, as Scarlett has mentioned, I do have a background in medicine, and no one has ever gotten out of one of my webinars without a small biology lesson. So I apologize for that. But this is a really awesome slide, in that a lot of people don't realize that the language that stress is manifested through inside the body is inflammation. So when you are basically running for your life from a hyena, the body is responding to that through an inflammatory cascade of chemical messengers. So it's normal for the body to elevate its its inflammatory response when there's a stress. Now, stress in the same like level of equality activates the immune system in the same way that it activates inflammation. So the immune system and the stress system are interconnected. You cannot activate the stress mechanism without incorporating the immune system, and you can't activate the immune system without the stress components turned on. So we tease them apart as two separate mechanisms to make it easier to understand. But the reality is that stress and your immune system and inflammation are very, very intertwined. So when we talk about how can we go about promoting more stress resilience, one of the major ways is by lowering your baseline level of inflammation, so that when you do have a stress, when you do have an immune system reaction, your body is able to contain the level of inflammation that is occurring. So the way I explain this is, if you take a cup of water, for an example, and I'm trying to play this and I don't feel like it's playing. Well, this is supposed to be like a little video where there's just a small amount of water, and then when you get sick or when you're stressed, the inflammation in the cup rises. You want to have a low enough level of inflammation in your body so that you don't overflow, because when you overflow, that's when your illness, your stress levels, they're not able to be contained by the body. So from a biological perspective, this is a really important tool to understand. Lowering your baseline level of inflammation is a very, very key kind of cornerstone to health. And here are some of the ways that we can do that: limiting sugar, improving your gut health, adding exercise or movement into your life, limiting alcohol, addressing and removing toxicities like molds and heavy metals and things of that nature, incorporating leafy green vegetables, ensuring that we have proper sleep, limiting processed foods. I cannot tell you how much inflammation just, processed foods can kind of bring into the body. And then identifying food sensitivities or food reactions or things like that, as well as mindfulness. So these are all, from the mechanics, from the physicality of things, how we can address stress, how we can choose to love ourselves by doing these things, right? A lot of us will say, hey, I've had a hard week. I'm going to go have a drink, or I'm going to go have a brownie or some type of a cookie, or I deserve that. But really, you're adding more stress to the body when you do that. So making the decision not to do those things is choosing love for yourself. All right, so let's talk about acute stress versus chronic stress. Remember, in the beginning, we talked about how everything is adaptive, right? And the stress mechanisms that we have in place are 2 million years old, and they're designed for our survival. They're designed to help us have the energy to run away from something that's trying to kill us, to have the energy and the strength to fight something that's threatening us, or to hide and freeze from something that's potentially, also potentially trying to kill us, predatorial or whatever it is. But here's the thing, is acute stress, when you experience it, should be something that happens to the body that you can then completely recover from. So when you experience stress, remember, you're trying to fight something, you're trying to run away from something. So your body is literally getting all hands on deck in order to do this. So in the form of chemical messengers, in the form of those inflammatory molecules, you get adrenaline, you get high blood pressure, your salt is reabsorbed so that your blood pressure goes up, so you have the ability to run away. Your pupils are dilated so you can see. Your heart rate starts pumping so that you have blood flow to those muscles so that you can succeed. The other thing that happens during acute stress is your mood is elevated, falsely elevated mood in the form of acute stress, because when you're running for your life, you don't have time to sit there and contemplate, oh my gosh, I might be eaten. Like, this is very depressing. I'm upset about this, because you're in survival mode. So these are all things I want you to remember when we start to talk about chronic stress, okay? So when you experience chronic stress, what's happening is you're not able to return to that homeostasis. You stay in the acute phase of stress. And when that happens over a long period of time, all of those changes that I just described to you that serve the purpose of surviving, they end up actually mimicking the signs and symptoms that are consistent with aging. Think about it. If you're constantly emptying the coffers, all of the storage that you have for rest and digest, for living well, full of vitality and energy, if you're constantly bringing those to the surface so that you can combat stress, basically you're emptying your body out, right? You're elevating your blood sugar, you're emptying your bones out of all of their nutrition, you're inhibiting your immune system, because that cortisol, over the long term, it's catabolic, it destroys tissues. So this is something that we need to, as a society, address, because for such a long period of time, we've just been taught push through, power through. And what we're learning now is that there are consequences to that. So in the natural world, right, in that activation of acute stress, the thing that turns that mechanism on is your gut instinct. The gut instinct served an evolutionary purpose in the natural world that activated the warning system for our fight or flight. So let's say you're in your small band hunter gathering tribe 1.5 million years ago, and you sense something that's out there that's dangerous. All of a sudden the danger alarms go off in your head, right? That is the way we were taught. We are adapted to be able to listen to that and feel that rush of energy, which is the fight or flight energy, to put that into action for the purpose of survival. Now, in the modern world, when we experience that, we've actually been trained to ignore it. Right? Let's say you wake up in the morning and you don't feel well, because all of those chemical messengers are sending your body signals that you have malaise, you feel depressed, you feel sick, you have a virus, for an example. Gut instinct says, go to sleep, don't even get up today, stay down. But modern world says, I have to go to work, I have to power through, I have to push. So what ends up happening is we get further and further and further away from the natural ability that we have to listen to the messages that the body is sending to us. And the body only has so many mechanisms, so many pathways that it can communicate with you. It's not very different than a toddler, right? Toddler that hasn't developed much language there's only so many ways it's going to get your attention, right? Crying, maybe like pulling, tugging on you, doing something to get your attention. But if it fails, the child cannot succeed at getting its need met, right? The body is no different. When it fails at trying to get your attention, then that's what opens it up to disease and whatever else would be, like dis-ease is what we call it. And so this is a really important cornerstone to my talk, because a lot of what we're going to do is focus on how every emotion that comes in should not be ignored, but actually really welcomed and inquired about. There should really be a conversation with whatever feelings you have, whatever emotions you have, because they're there for a reason. We are here in this body, in this iteration of ourselves for a reason. So we shouldn't ignore that. And so I kind of already said that here, is that our feelings serve a purpose, right? There's a reason we have our feelings. And because survival is no longer challenged in the day-to-day, like none of us really wake up in the morning without a reasonable amount of confidence that we're going to make it through the day, right? Without a reasonable amount of confidence that I'm going to find food today. I'm going to have shelter from the elements today. I'm pretty sure nothing's going to eat me today. So we don't really need a lot of that gut feeling, that gut instinct. We have the kind of the luxury of being able to ignore it. But the feelings do serve a purpose, and it's something that we're going to discuss a little bit further. So moving forward, what's going to happen is we're going to utilize the Choose Love formula to serve as our guide for how to live soul-minded, right? Soul-minded living is living in a way that supports the human body, that supports the mind and the spirit based on its adaptive needs. And we're going to utilize this formula to kind of guide us through. Now, the challenge that I'm going to share, like challenge you with, so to speak, is I want you to really shift your perspective of what you already know about yourself in the following slides. And I really want you to explore your emotional landscape as we move forward. Okay. So we're going to start with courage, right? I think that a lot of us can agree that it takes courage to eat right, and it takes courage to exercise. And I'm going to convince you that it actually takes a little bit of courage to sleep well. And we're going to talk about how and why that is. So again, the shifting perspective, right? We're going to shift our perspective to the knowledge that everything is adaptive, and that part of that adaptation is that human beings have a diet. There is foods that we kind of need to eat in order to have health come in. In the same way, I always say this when I'm speaking to little kids because they get it. In the same way that we can't feed our dogs chocolate. Everybody knows that if you feed a dog chocolate, it's going to get sick because chocolate is not a natural part of the dog's diet. There are certain food items that are not part of our natural diet, and it's okay to consume them every once in a while. But when your entire landscape of your diet is made up of these foods, then you're not really consuming a human diet. It's like you're kind of just a dog eating chocolate all the time, right? So eating is not something you do correctly for 2 or 3 weeks and then stop. It's a lifestyle. And everything that we're talking about today is a lifestyle. It's a small daily decision to do what's right for your body. So the challenge in this slide, the shifting of perspective, is to ask yourself, what's my relationship to nourishing food? What's my relationship to eating? Am I someone who only eats when I'm bored, only eats when I'm emotional, only eats when I'm hungry? What's my relationship to actual food or the experience of eating? These are all questions that I would love for you to write down. You don't need to answer them right now, because the truth is some of these questions really do take some thoughtful contemplation. But next time you go to grab something to eat, ask yourself, am I actually hungry, or am I just craving this? Am I actually hungry, or am I bored? Am I actually hungry, or am I upset that X, Y, and Z just happened? And, again, soul-minded living, it's a conscious, active decision. Write it down, make a note of it. I'm actually just, it's after lunch and I usually like chocolate after lunch, and that's okay, right? There's nothing wrong with that. But if that's the pattern of your eating, that's something that you should bring into your consciousness so that we can shift that if that needs to be shifted. So when I'm speaking to a big crowd, I don't know what everybody's individual needs are. It's very difficult to say, this is the kind of diet you should have. This is the kind of food plan you should have. Albeit for the purpose of health, there are specific food plans for specific health needs. But the broad strokes for healthy eating, if you do nothing else, if you take nothing bad out of the diet, if all you do is just add colors into your diet, you're winning today. Because the American diet, what we call the standard American diet, or the SAD, the SAD diet, is very white and brown and yellow. It's not heavy in color, and colors are where all of the phytonutrients come in. And those phytonutrients are where all of the benefits for your gut and your microbiome come in. So it's not enough to just eat colorfully, but you also have to eat diversely. So I have a lot of clients who will say, I got into a pattern, I'm eating cherry tomatoes and I put a lemon in my water and I have an orange after lunch and I'm just going through the colors. And that's what I do. But that's not enough. You need to eat a different color purple every day, a different color green every day. You have to incorporate all kinds of different foods into your diet, because a diverse diet is a healthy individual. And I always like to say, isn't that it's true on the inside as it is on the outside, right? Diversity in life, in human interaction, promotes health because it shifts your perspective. It gives you other points of view. So eating diversely is a huge component to health. The other component is eating whole foods, foods that have not been processed. So whole foods are items that came out of the ground, right? Or, and animals, even though I argue that animals kind of come out of the ground because they eat the foods from the ground, right? Or out of the water. So, and have not been processed. So the easiest example is a potato. A potato is a whole food, but a potato chip is a processed food, right? Ensuring that you're eating healthy fats. The majority of Americans consume very low levels of omega-3 and omega-6 fatty acids. And these are fats that are found in cold water fish and things like flaxseed and omega seeds and hemp seeds as well. But also maintaining proper hydration is a big part of being healthy. I can't tell you how many people will tell me, I don't like water. And it drives me a little bit bonkers because water is literally the only beverage that we find in nature. So you can't tell me that you don't like water. You have to drink water. All right, so let's just quickly go through the don'ts. I'm going to fly through them because each and every one of you already knows these things, right? You have to limit the processed foods. You have to limit the prepared foods. There are so many chemicals and food additives that are added to processed foods. And it's funny because even if you commit to and challenge yourself, say, I'm going to cook every single meal or eat a whole food for a month, and then you go back to like even just eating out, you don't know the fats that they're using. They're using the lowest quality, the cheapest ingredients for the purpose of making a profit. It feels different. You feel less energy once you've experienced healthy eating. I always tell people to limit their gluten and dairy because they are inflammatory components, and gluten is the most heavily consumed food product in the country. So if you make the decision to avoid it, chances are you're gonna run into it, when it's not your choice, when you're at someone's house and they've made you a baked good, or they've brought over a dish for you or whatever. Gluten is everywhere. And dairy, there's a lot of discussion about dairy, but it is an inflammatory food. So we're trying to limit inflammation, and that's why I encourage that. We talked a little bit about hydration. I just wanted to say it's half your weight in body. It's half your body weight in ounces. I see Scarlett drinking water. Nicely done. If you have the ability to make an effort to avoid plastic, because a lot of our exposure to the microplastics is making an impact on our health. But the question is, what is my relationship to water? Am I someone who hates water? Am I someone who can only drink water if it has, sugar added to it or a flavor added to it? Ask the question. That's the challenge today. Let's talk a little bit about now the challenge of detoxification. All right. We live in a time where we are just overrun with toxicities. There's pollutants, there's toxins, there's metabolic end products. These are the naughty food bits that we've been talking about. Like, one of the professors I worked with used to call it the sticky buns phenomena, the croissants and the funnel cakes and all these things that really produce very rancid end products for our body that has to be detoxified. It's a ton of work on the body. But also things that we have to detoxify are the biological components that we make. So we have to break down and detoxify estrogen and hormones and neurotransmitters and cholesterol molecules. After the body uses these things, serotonin and dopamine and all of these neurotransmitters, the body has to digest them and break them away. So again, we're trying to limit our baseline inflammation. The body already has so much to do endogenously. So if you can avoid certain things exogenously, like easy one to get rid of is stop painting your nails, ladies. Stop using harsh chemical cleaning products. Because these are all exogenous things that our body has to detoxify. So anytime that you can limit exposure to these things is good. Even our water supply, our food, even the organic vegetables really have some toxicity, pesticides in them that need to be detoxified. So the quick and easy kind of safe way on your own to detoxify your body is to drink more water, to eat leafy green vegetables, particularly those that are cruciferous family. They're hugely detoxifying. They just promote the liver to detoxify you. Sleeping well, and we're going to spend some time on sleep. B vitamins, all of the B vitamins are involved in the detoxification process. I think we already said shifting from chemical cleaning agents and cosmetics to more natural products, and avoiding sugar. Sugar is such a harsh component. It's just such a harsh additive in the body. It's so inflammatory. It's so addicting. So if you can really make an effort to limit it, I think you'll find a difference. So the next emotional inquiry that we're going to make, the next challenge to our perspective is, what is my relationship to movement? What's my relationship to exercise? Am I someone who is totally intimidated by movement? Am I someone who just hates moving? What am I willing to commit to shift that perspective? And I totally understand this, because I have a lot of clients who everything limits them. They don't like wearing sneakers. It's a generational thing. Movement was just not something that was part of their generation, for an example. But the challenge is, Am I willing to just say to myself, you know what? I'm not even going to exercise. I'm just going to start parking my car far away from the supermarket. I'm going to start taking the stairs instead of the escalator. I'm going to try and actively shift my relationship with movement and encourage more movement in my life. One of the things we talk about also is during the course of the day. Now, I know that I have a lot of, I think, teachers and administrators in this webinar today. So this probably doesn't apply to you because I know you guys are moving and shaking and up and down all day long. But folks that, you know, your significant others or your friends or your family, you can share this with them, where if you're sitting in front of a computer all day long, or if you're desk bound, if your job is desk bound, add movement snacks to the course of your living. So, make the trash can something that you need to get up to reach. Make the copy machine somewhere central in the office so that you have to get up to go there. Just getting up out of the chair, or making the decision every hour, I'm going to squat in and out of my chair for 5 times, or something like that. Because even just that small, seemingly silly, seemingly not adding any benefit to my cardiovascular health, what it's doing is it's emotionally shifting your relationship to movement, and it's allowing, hopefully, for more movement to come in. So maybe on a Saturday, it's beautiful out. You say, you know what? It's so nice out. I'm going to go for a walk. Whereas before, maybe there was a little bit of fear attached to that idea, right? So I just have there written for you that the Food and Drug Administration officially recommends 150 minutes per week of moderate intensity exercise, right? So you can do that as 300 minutes of low intensity or 75 minutes of high intensity, but that's what is recommended, okay? And we know that exercise promotes healthy cardiovascular, promotes bone health, improves insulin resistance, and of course, weight loss. It purges excess mitochondria, which is our energy powerhouse to our cells. It promotes detoxification, and it also supports brain cognition. So just getting that circulatory, that circulation system really nice and strong. All right, let's talk about sleep. This is totally overlooked in our culture. People joke with me, they laugh with me. Oh, I don't have time to sleep. My job is too important. Time to sleep when I'm dead, all of these things. And it drives me a little bit bonkers because, none of us here would expect our cell phones to function for us without us charging them. None of us here would say, you are completely within your logical mind if you want to just drive to California without stopping once for gas. Sleep is our reset button. And you know what it resets the most is our psychological system. The brain, we talked about detoxification, right? You detoxify through your skin, through your liver, through your kidneys, right? And through your lungs. So you can exhale toxicities if they lend themselves to that. But here's the deal, guys. There's no opening in your brain for detoxification. How does the brain cell detoxify? Here's the answer. When you go to sleep, the neurons actually shrink by 40%. In order for the cerebral spinal fluid to come into the brain and effectively wash and detoxify all the cellular debris out of the brain. So when you say, oh my God, I can't even think straight, I didn't sleep well last night, you're telling the truth. You are 100% being accurate, because when you don't sleep well, your brain is not functioning at its optimal capacity, okay? So learning how to sleep well does that for you. It improves your cognition, but it also facilitates gut health. It improves insulin resistance and metabolism. It promotes detoxification, and it does improve exercise performance. So restorative sleep is a huge part of living in a soul-minded way. Now, there's a formula for sleeping well. So if you're someone who's on the phone, reading the emails, getting your news in those last final hours before you sleep, if you're that person who's eating right before you go to sleep, you are actually disrupting your circadian rhythm. So in order for sleep to evolve in this healthy and natural way, you have to set a bedtime routine, okay? There's kind of no other way around it. You know, babies have a bedtime routine, adults need a bedtime routine. And the routine actually gives your body permission. What you're doing is you're creating space and giving your body permission to relax. Once your body is able to relax, that's when sleep comes in. You can't read an aggravating email or watch some inflammatory news issue and go right to sleep, because your brain is like, oh my God, fight or flight is turned on. So these are some of the things that I recommend for promoting healthy sleep. And I want to bring your attention to the lower left corner first, because I always like to tackle the biological components of things first, because when you prime the body in the physical realm, then the emotional and the spiritual realms are more willing to come along. So it's really important that you stop eating 2 to 3 hours before you go to sleep. Now, if you are going to tell me, but Nadine, I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm starving, I need to eat something before I go to sleep, I want you to email me separately, because you're someone who needs to eat more calories during the day. That's what your problem is. We need to shift you a little bit. So if that's what your issue is, we can talk about that offline. But eating, stopping food 2 to 3 hours before bedtime, before sleep time, is a wonderful way to prime your body to go to sleep. The digestive process needs to turn off. It's like a factory line, right? If you put one kernel of food on that conveyor belt, a factory line, the whole thing is going to turn on. So it needs to be completely shut off so that all of those factory workers can go to sleep, can shut off and go to sleep. And there's a huge process that takes place in the digestive system during sleep that is important for gut health, bowel movement, etc. It's like a whole different lecture, really. So the other thing that I would encourage is to stop drinking liquids about 1 to 2 hours before you go to sleep. When you drink a liquid, it takes an hour to reach your bladder. So you really want to shut that down about an hour to an hour and a half at the very minimum, so that you're not waking up in the middle of the night to go get up and use the bathroom. Because again, some people can do that and it's no problem. But other people, once they wake up, it's very difficult for them to go back to sleep. So don't interrupt at all, right? Limit your alcohol and your caffeine, right? You really shouldn't have much more caffeine beyond 1 o'clock, unless you have the genes to digest caffeine and you're the kind of person who could just slam a double espresso and go right to bed. I would discourage you from having any caffeine after 1 in the afternoon. All right. So that's kind of the biological perspective. And then we start getting into the emotional perspective. Turning the lights off, turning the lights down in the house, lighting candles instead, turning the blue light on your electronics, or just shutting electronics off at night can really prime the body, give the body the message that, all right, the day is over, it's time to relax. Taking it up a notch, you know, taking a bath, stretching is a wonderful way, doing like a self massage with oil, just on your own body, just rubbing your shoulders, rubbing your legs, really promotes lymphatic flow and promotes detoxification and just relaxation in general. From the spiritual component, I love meditation at night. I love journaling at night. I love reading, particularly books of wisdom at night, not necessarily like a murder mystery, but something that's calming. Is really a great way to prime the body for sleep. All right, let's shift gears a little bit. We're going to talk about gratitude and how gratitude and fostering a sense of gratitude can help with living in a soul-minded way. Gratitude is defined as a state of being grateful. It's a readiness to show appreciation for and return kindness. Now, gratitude is not something that you can experience if you're in fight or flight. So the challenge for this is to ask yourself the question, what is my relationship with myself? What's my relationship with others? Is there a pattern? What's my relationship with my community? What's my relationship with my environment? We're going to tackle these last two here, and then we'll talk about the first two later down the road. So this is something that is often very much overlooked. And again, bringing your awareness to these things can help foster mindfulness. So, what's your familiarity with your just your own property, the property that you live on? Do you know the names of the trees that are growing on your property? Do you know the kinds of birds that you have flying around and nesting in your area? Do you know what kind of wildlife you have? What kind of flowers you have? What kind of bushes? What kind of insects you've got going on just on your property? And it's very thought-provoking when you say, oh, you know what? I really have no idea. Whereas, again, in another time and place, we would be very heavily reliant on these things for survival, for protection, for potentially food. So getting acquainted with your local community, just from the wildlife perspective, is something worth an investigation, right? We're on this emotional investigation. What's your relationship with the members of your community? Do you know your neighbors' names? Do you know what they do for a living? Do you know the names of the crossing guards and the police members of the police force, members of the firefighting force? Do you know the name of your mail carrier, the person that brings you mail every day? Do you have any relationships with some of your local business owners? What about, we also talk about what's the relationship with the community at large? Do I have any idea what some of the local ordinances are, some of the local legal issues that are being addressed by local, commissioners and things of that nature? What's my level of involvement in my community? Because again, that intraconnectivity that we are taking for granted, because we don't have those survival needs, right? We get to just go in our house and close the door and everything is taken care of. Another time and place, we relied on one another much more heavily for survival. Now we really only rely on one another maybe for emotional support. So leaning into your community, making the active decision to lean into your community and participate more in it and be more of a part of it allows you to live in a more soul-minded way. Because what you're doing is you're spreading love, right? You're getting to know you're trying to make your post delivery person smile. You're trying to make that person who's giving you, can I even say you're buying a newspaper? Buying whatever it is you're buying from your local business owner, trying to, brighten their day or make them smile. All of that stuff adds up, right? Let's zoom out even further. What's my relationship to Mother Earth? Do I even think about it on the day-to-day? Or do I have am I one of these people that's very anthropocentric, right? Do I believe that human beings are dominant to all other life force, that this entire globe and all of its resources are here just for my use? And am I willing to reevaluate that viewpoint, right? Think about the cell phone. How often first of all, even just 10 years ago, there were no smartphones, there were flip phones. But think about how often you buy a new cell phone, or how often you buy new technology, a new computer, a new pad, a new gaming system. All of these technologies require the mining of precious metals like tungsten and cobalt and nickel. And we're draining the earth of these products. Is that something I think about when I go to buy a new phone? Is it something I think about when I have a perfectly well-functioning phone and I just want the new phone? So what's the relationship? Do I feel an interconnectedness? And if I don't, am I willing to reassess, right? Am I willing to recycle? Am I willing to compost? Am I someone who just throws my gum on the ground or throws gum right out the window, not really considering it kills animals when they eat it? Am I someone who pesticides my lawns kind of aggressively? Or I read an article recently that was saying that some neighborhoods are so aggressively like landscaped with the blower and the lawnmower and everything, that we're all actually breathing in higher levels of pollution, because that gasoline exhaust is like a nonstop. One neighbor on this side has it, 2 hours later it's that neighbor, 2 hours later it's that neighbor. So are we taking this into consideration, or is it just this unconscious, automatic, well, I need my lawn to look a certain way, I need to have the newest phone? These are things that we need to question. We need to take these things into consideration in order to live a soul-minded way. Now, part kind of going hand in hand with that is we live in an era where we have a lot of choices, right? We have choices in foods, we have fashion choices, multiple car models to choose from, so much social media to kind of filter through. So is there too many choices? Are we becoming paralyzed by the choices? There is this choice paradox, which leads to a certain level of frustration, a certain level of confusion, a certain level of anxiety, believe it or not. So what's my relationship to choice? Am I someone who gets very much overrun by the research and the reviews? And now how much time am I spending, just to buy, for an example, a volleyball net, for an example, how much time am I really spending? Because I am so anxiety ridden about getting the best, getting the most, getting whatever it is. And so then we talk about this embracing of minimalistic living. This is very much a soul-minded concept, and it's based in science. There are lots of studies that show a connection between happiness and minimalistic living. And it's not exactly applicable, but it does tick a lot of boxes to say that I have a lot of clients, younger clients who are kids, right? If they get in trouble because they're misusing their cell phone, their parents will take the cell phone away, right? After 3 days, the child will say, I feel better. I'm actually grateful that I don't have the phone anymore. It's a burden. There's an anxiety to it, this upkeep, right? This upkeep with the social media world. It extends into stuff, right? There is studies that show that getting rid of your stuff alleviates stress. And we've all experienced this. We've all cleaned our rooms and restructured, reorganized the room, and you walk in and you're like, I feel great. I feel good about myself. I'm happy in my space. Everything is clean and organized. I threw away all the garbage. And added benefit is it saves money. When you make the decision to live in a minimal way, you're actually purchasing less, but you're purchasing higher quality things. And actually, it allows for health to come in. There was a study, actually, the study looked at 23 studies on minimalistic living. And they did like a statistical analysis on all 23 of these studies. And they found that there was 80% findings connecting happiness and minimalism. So when you make the decision to limit your purchase of things, It promotes, first of all, you're prioritizing your values. So you're choosing love. You're saying, this thing looks so cool, but I don't need it. And that's serving me. It saves me money. It's one less thing that is going to end up in a landfill somewhere, right? And it enhances psychological well-being. It promotes psychological growth because it allows you to really focus on the things that actually make you happy. And it's better for the environment. Okay, we just kind of talked about how the environment is really suffering as a result of our excess way of living. And we have so much at our disposal that now we actually have to choose less in order to be healthy. There was something that I was going to say. It escaped my mind. Hopefully it'll come back. But the challenge here is, what's my relationship to things? What's my relationship to things? And then we talk about how can we live with less? You know, you can challenge yourself to say, I'm going to give one thing away every day. So at the end of a year, you've given away 365 items. You know, buying higher quality items, making the decision to compost, making the decision to recycle, to donate, to re-gift things. You know, choose to gift the experience versus like choose an experience to gift someone instead of a thing. So as an example, you know, let's say you have a niece or a nephew that live far away. Maybe your gift to them is that you jump on a flight and you spend the weekend with them. That's a gift, right? You're spending money, but you're giving your time. And how much is gained from that? You're gaining a relationship with a person instead of sending them a toy and saying, this is from Aunt so-and-so, or this is from Uncle so-and-so. So there's so much more to be gained from the experience. Another example is you could send, you know, horseback riding lessons, or I don't know, painting lessons, or something for someone to enjoy rather than an item, which kind of brings us right into mindfulness. I have to say that everything that we've been describing here today is the practice of some level of mindfulness, some level of conscious living. In everything that you're doing up until this point, whether it's eating or sleeping or exercising or purchasing, you're thinking about, do I need this? Do I want this? Does this serve me? And so mindfulness is the key to emotional exploration. And the only way we can do that is without judgment. Whatever it is, you observe it, you look at it, you view it, and without judgment, but also there's a level of acceptance in the absence of that judgment. It just is, right? So you practice mindfulness universally. It's not just sitting on top of a mountain and meditating in this kind of stereotypical way, but you practice mindfulness in what you are feeling emotionally. You practice mindfulness in what you are feeling physically, in your actions and your reactions and your behaviors. Now, I want to bring some attention to this. For an example, let me think about this. Let's say you're having a little bit of an argument with someone and they just say something that's a little bit too low of a blow for you, and it strikes you. Where do you feel that in your body? Some people describe it as heat that comes all over their heart chakra. Some people feel it as a constriction in their throat. Some people feel it as a drop in the stomach. So mindfulness for how your body is responding to the emotional components of your day-to-day living. Where do you feel tension? Where do you feel heat? Where do you feel throbbing? And then spending time with that, getting to know it, getting to understand it, is a huge component in soul-minded living, because it allows you to, once you have the understanding of it, it dissolves. And so you don't retain the emotion, you don't retain the anger, you don't repeat the action if you're the one who's doling out that behavior. So paying attention to the tension is part of mindfulness, okay? And it is a journey. It's not just, like I said, sitting on top of a mountain and meditating. It's an active process that you have to bring into every single facet of your living. Mindfulness, as you've hopefully seen me describe, is not just emotional. It's in the food choices you make. It's in the decisions to move. It's in the decisions to sleep. It's in the decisions to drink healthy beverages. And so you begin the process. It's a lifelong journey. Every time you think, all right, I'm there, I got it, something happens and another big opening occurs and another parcel of growth takes place. You know, another package of work presents itself to you. And so you begin with presence, and there's no right way to start, right? Because all of the ways are a way of starting. So, but the presence is a key, and observing is a key. But you can do it with journaling. You can just even walking barefoot, like grounding, movement, stretching, Tai Chi, dancing. These are all ways home, ways back inward. But therapy is a huge support system. It's not the only thing. I think a lot of people will say, well, I'm in therapy for that, or I do yoga for that. And then that's it. They kind of bottleneck themselves and say, that's the end of it. I don't inquire. I don't ask. I don't investigate any other components of myself. Now, if you don't want to do any of those things, you don't want to see anybody or talk to anybody or journal about anything, the very least you can do, the very kind of fundamental thing, is to learn how to breathe properly. Breath can serve as that pathway, can serve as the highway to mindfulness, because it allows us to focus our attention on physical outlets which alert us to our senses, right? So breath, if you focus on your breath, what are you doing? You're listening to it and you're feeling it, right? So those are two of our five senses. And actually, breath can even promote your sense of smell if there's a scent in the air, right? But so what it's doing is it allows you that rhythmic up and down motion of the breath. It allows that parasympathetic mode to come in. And so when we are stressed, when we're in fight or flight, when we're experiencing some sort of confrontation is a good way to say it. If you just focus on the breath, it's a way back. It's a way back to mindedness, a way back to presence. Now, of course, we always talk about the biology of breath, right? What is it doing? When you're breathing well, you're converting oxygen into energy, right? The lungs expand. They allow oxygen to come in. There's a gas exchange that takes place between oxygen and carbon dioxide. You exhale what you don't need, and you take that oxygen and you use it to convert whatever you've just eaten into energy. So if you do that well, there will be more energy, right? A lot of us breathe with what we call our accessory muscles. We kind of do this. Our shoulders go up and our shoulders go down. And that guarantees neck tension and muscle tension, neck tension and shoulder tension. So if you're someone who has a lot of neck tension and muscle stress in your shoulders, just learning this one way to breathe, diaphragmatic breathing, can really help to alleviate some of that imbalance in muscle. Now, there's lots and lots of really fun ways to breathe. I didn't leave much room for discussion of that today, but diaphragmatic breathing is the fundamental, okay? And we can kind of go through it really quickly, but basically what it is it's imagine a balloon is expanding inside your belly. A lot of us breathe badly because we're trying to suck our belly in, because our society has taught us that a skinny belly is somehow the only definition of beauty, right? But if you just push your belly button out, push it out, and imagine that there's a balloon that's expanding in the three-dimensional space, you will, if you do this 3 and 4 and 5 times, at one moment, you'll feel like it's an oxygen hunger that gets satisfied. And if you, once you do that, you've got it. You do that 5 times, you might even feel a little lightheaded because your body is not even used to having that much oxygen in your body. So it's a really wonderful, free, available at all times, don't need any devices or tools or anything to do it. It's always there for you. And as you can see here, there's tons of benefits, okay? It balances your muscles if there's an imbalance there. It stimulates the vagus nerve, which is the nerve that goes, it's our longest nerve in our body, from our brain to our diaphragm. It stimulates the rest and digest. So it reduces heart rate and blood pressure. It helps to improve your posture, and it improves your stability as well. Learning how to breathe well it's a fundamental cornerstone to living in a healthy way. Let's talk about forgiveness. This is where I wanted to talk about relationship with self and relationship with other, because I find that if you're truly doing an emotional exploration, there is very, very often, I mean, I can't say that I've ever worked with someone who hasn't had to do this. You have to reset the relationship with self, because a lot of us have we have a very interesting way that we communicate with ourselves, and the way that bringing mindfulness and attention to the way that you speak to yourself can really shed light on why you are where you are in the emotional landscape. So if you're someone who's constantly berating, if the voice in your head is constantly like, oh, you're so stupid, oh, nobody's gonna believe you if you talk like that, oh, you look dumb in that outfit, oh, like if that's what you hear all day long, you have some work to do. And it's not your fault. Somebody probably taught you how to speak to yourself that way, and I will tell you, we all do it. But it's something we all have to undo. And a big part of choosing love is learning how to speak to yourself more kindly. So through this emotional exploration, this is the one that most people want to avoid, because nobody wants to do this work, because oftentimes it does bring up some pain. But I encourage you to do it anyway, because what's on the other side of that pain is some really awesome stuff. Now, this is a self-esteem questionnaire. I actually got this from the Journal of Research and Personality. And, you know, you can take a screenshot of this if you want and do this questionnaire later. It just helps you to gauge where you're at with how you are with yourself, you know, and I'm not going to go through the whole thing because you can do that later. But if you look at it, right, I believe I possess several good qualities. You know, I believe that I am just as capable of doing things as well as the average person. Sometimes I feel that I'm useless. Sometimes I feel that I don't have a lot to be proud of. Sometimes I believe that I'm a failure, you know, and then the other side, I believe that I am as worthy as most other people. This is a great way for you to gauge, you know, I might have some work to do. Like, I'm pretty hard on myself. And so, you know, it's just a matter of, again, take the quiz, see what the answers are. And then it's no judgment. This is where I'm at. It's you along with the rest of the world. You're not alone in this. You know, we have a culture that trains us to turn away from ourselves. So if you're hard on yourself, it's because your culture taught you to do that. And we have to undo some of that so that we can rewrite some of the cultural norms that were circulating, particularly to our younger people. I can say that since I know that I'm speaking to people who interact with a lot of young people, right? So another thing that you can do to foster a relationship with yourself is to, again, just make a list of some of your qualities, right? Each of us, this is the cool thing, right? We are all on this planet as unique individuals. We are all stems. We are all kind of individuated from a collective unified consciousness into unique snowflakes. And each and every one of us is different from the other. And the reason for that is so that we can take our uniqueness and imbue it back into the collective conscious in our own awesome, creative, unique way. So we don't want to be like everybody else. We don't want to be like the other. We want to identify our unique gifts so that we can use them to improve the world. So make a list of things about yourself that you love most. Make a list of why these qualities are beneficial to people around you and the people that surround you. Make a list of how you are planning to highlight or underscore these qualities about yourself in your life. And I can guarantee you, some of you are going to have trouble doing this. And if you are someone who's having trouble doing this, especially the first one, if you can't even make a list of things that you love about yourself, we have some work to do. And that's okay, right? But do the work, because what's on the other side of that work is all the ooey gooey good stuff. So we've been talking all evening about fostering curiosity, fostering emotional exploration, fostering this inquiry, so to speak. So the invitation is, again, to invite that into every single interaction. Now, you don't have to do it in the present moment, right? But you can do it on the back end, either just thinking about it, you can journal about it, you can chat about it with someone who you love and trust. But again, let's say there was some sort of a confrontation. How did I feel in that confrontation? Where did I feel it rise in my body? Did something get hot? Was there a throbbing somewhere? Was there tension? How do I feel now? Do I have tension in my neck now because of that situation? Did I sleep poorly that evening? So going back and kind of revisiting the experience is how you curiously probe into your emotional landscape. Now, here's a couple of really important questions. How did I really want to respond? Or what perfect version of myself, or that's not the right word, what ideal version of myself would have responded? And where did I learn to respond the way that I did? Because oftentimes you will find that you learned how to respond that way in the past. Somebody taught that to you. I should say somebody mistaught that to you. Because remember, we're a product of the generation prior to us, what they infused in us. And so you need to ask yourself, is that serving me in this present context, so many years later? You have to ask yourself that question. And if it doesn't, then you have to kind of do that work. All right. So the next question is, what's my relationship with other? How do I show up in other relationships? Am I likable? Am I cooperative? Am I productive? Am I a problem solver? Or am I defensive? Am I protective? Am I manipulative? Do I show up inflated? Do I like to make myself look bigger than I am? Am I passive? Am I submissive? Am I avoidant of other relationships? So making a note of these things, because in order for us to be relatable, in order for us to be relational, we have to have a feeling of safety. And that is true in nature, and it is true in our biology. Remember, everything is adaptive. We adapted these emotional techniques in order to survive nature. So take an example of a baby cub with its mama, right? If I'm not feeling safe, I'm not going to come out and play as a baby cub, right? So it's the same with relationality, with relating to others. So what type of environment do I need in order to be relational? What type of boundaries? Is there a lack of consistency, or a consistency that I need in order to have that? These are all questions that we can inquire about ourselves, right? All right. So there's a fundamental dysfunctional thought that I think a lot of us kind of walk around with. And it's actually been a study showing that folks that were they were questioned about, their sense of community and their sense of welcomeness and their sense of worthiness and their sense of wantedness. And it was found almost ubiquitously that people with feelings of depression, feelings of anxiety, they had this overwhelming, this kind of baseline just feeling that they were wrong, that there was something wrong with them, that they show up in their world wrong. And that's really a deeply rooted limiting belief that is it's really taught to us when we're young. We're taught that we're not really welcome, and it's often a widespread phenomenon in the way that we treat and raise our children. Children are often met with impatience, with frustration, with, I know previous generations have been raised with be seen but not be heard. So when you're a child that comes up in a culture like that, you can't help but feel like you're not really wanted, you're not really welcomed. So I would encourage you all, maybe tonight or tomorrow or some point in life, in a meditative state, ask yourself this question: under what circumstances could I believe that I have been, that I am, and that I always have been welcome and worthy? And so, of course, I think you're getting to know that every question I ask leads to another. What would my life look like if I allowed myself to believe that I was welcome and worthy? To allow yourself to believe that you have no limits. You're not limited by your lack of education, by your lack of ability to use social media, by your lack of knowledge, we're not limited by anything other than our beliefs that we're limited. So if we can shift that perspective, potentially there's a new vitality of life that can evolve as a result of that. And that is the goal of soul-minded living, right? That is the reason we choose love at every opportunity, in order to release ourselves from this kind of dysfunctional thought that I can't because. Because why? You can do anything you want. You can believe anything you want. You're limitless. And then what would my life look like? Where would I be? Who would I be? Visualize that person. Close your eyes and visualize, where is that person? What is it wearing? What's its profession? What's its relational life? What's its social life look like? And then you kind of make the steps that are necessary to get closer and closer and closer to that vision every day. All right, let's talk about compassion. Compassion doesn't really exist without action, right? Seeing another person's suffering is one component, but having the desire to ease another person's suffering is the definition of compassion, right? And in the Choose Love formula, it's compassion in action. Now, again, yeah, I think it's you're all sick of hearing me say it, but you have to identify your suffering. You have to emotionally inquire. You have to be willing to explore your inner landscape and see what is causing your suffering. Is it something that is a physical entity, like I had some sort of an accident? Is it an emotional issue? Is it a PTSD issue? Is it a trauma issue? Is it the way you were spoken to as a child? Is it the way you're spoken to by somebody who you relate to on the day to day? It requires understanding, and that requires curiosity, and that requires an inquiry. But once you have that understanding within yourself, then all of a sudden something really cool happens. All of the sudden you have the ability to be compassionate to others, because once you understand your own suffering, you understand the suffering of the entire universe. Because again, we're just individuals of one consciousness, of one experience. We're all equipped with the same set of tools, right? Some of us just use them better than others. But having compassion is the key to being able to relate to other people, because once you have that ability, then you recognize it in others. Now, this journey of emotional competence, right? It requires the mindfulness, non-judgmental curiosity. But once you have that, you can see past what we call the tip of the iceberg, right? The tip of the iceberg is what people show us. It's people's behaviors. So especially we see this in children. When children misbehave, when they act out, when they're behaving in ways that are not necessarily neurotypical, you have to look beyond the behavior. And we know that when it comes to, for an example, a child. But we have to apply that same level of compassion to one another, to ourselves, first of all, and then to one another, by recognizing that that larger submerged part is the part that drives the behavior. It's the part that needs the attention. And that is the part, that is the unmet need that's trying to be met, that's peeking out through the ocean saying, this is all I can muster up. This is the only way I can communicate my need. And I rely on you, compassionate being, to recognize my suffering and help ease my suffering, right? It's Thich Nhat Hanh. He's one of my favorite Buddhist monks. He says, well, it is a Buddhist concept, I will admit, but he, among other Buddhists, will say, when we acknowledge, embrace, and understand our suffering, we suffer much less. And when you understand your suffering, you understand everyone. And the world shifts for you. The world shifts. It's a totally different experience. So I just want to thank you for your attention. I just want to say that, because our survival needs are met, right? We need to make a conscious decision to live in a soul-minded way. It's a choice. In another time and place, maybe 1,000,000 years ago, we lived this way automatically. But now we have to live in a way that supports the human body, the human mind, and the human spirit, because it's based on adaptive needs. And choosing to live in this way fosters love. It fosters confidence and vitality into your life. And hopefully, if you begin to practice these things, you'll begin to encounter love in everywhere you go and everyone you meet, because it's there, right? We're not aware of it because we're so busy in the unconscious realm. When you bring consciousness into being, it's everywhere. Like I said, it's in the trees right outside your front doorstep. It's in the bird and the little dragonfly that lands on your windshield or whatever. It's all there. So thank you for your attention. I know that that was probably a lot, but I just want to take some questions if anybody has any. Let me just kind of do this. And we'll end that. Oh, hold on. Okay. So, let's see. Did people ask questions in the chat?
I think they can do both. They can
Okay.
ask them in the chat, and you can also raise your hand if you have a question.
Yeah.
That was amazing. I've been chatting with people
Cool.
behind the scenes saying that they were amazed and that it was a lot. I know I was taking pages of notes.
Wow.
So
Okay.
yeah, really amazing. Thank you
Cool.
so much.
Oh, it's my pleasure. My pleasure. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. You guys were having fun in the chat without me.
I can't.
Yeah. Breathing is very miraculous. Whoever wrote that.
Mhm.
So it doesn't have to be questions. If anybody has an experience that they're willing to share or just anything willing to share, let's do it.
Here's a
Oh,
question from Dawn, who is the Choose Love Hawaii ambassador. She
cool.
says, you touched briefly on PTSD. I've recently been introduced to CPTSD,
Yeah,
complex
complex.
PTSD, which seems more extreme. What are some simple solutions and lifestyle choices to make for overcoming, just simple solutions, Nadine, for overcoming CPTSD?
Yeah. So CPTSD, Don, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't CPTSD like the post-traumatic stress from the lowercase t traumas, right? Like the day-to-day stresses, right? Like the folks of us that are struggling that haven't necessarily had like an enormous trauma in our life. I'm pretty sure that that's what this is awful, CPTSD is. And the truth is the way to overcome that is exactly what we've been talking about, so when your body is in a fight or flight state, um, it's very difficult to become relational, right? So the easiest way to establish a little bit of getting a foothold on that is to go about it through the physical body, through the biological realm. So if you're not able to address emotional issues firstly, then address biological issues. So clean up the diet, drink water, figure out if you're being exposed to some sort of toxicity in the day to day. Like, are you someone that maybe has some sort of mold exposure, maybe has some sort of heavy metal exposure? Are you someone who gets sick often? Are you someone who gets certain types of infections in a repeated fashion? If you are, there may be some biological things that we can do to lower the inflammation in the body. When we lower inflammation in the body, it's easier for the body to get back online emotionally, right? Because neurotransmitters are made in the gut, right? So if you have a lot of inflammation, most likely your gut is not in good shape. So there's not one way to kind of overcome complex post-traumatic stress disorder. There's a multitude of ways, but one way to do it is to tackle it through a healthy living mindset, because when you shift the internal landscape, when you're eating in a more healthy way, when you're sleeping and getting healthy restorative sleep, when you're moving your body in a meaningful way, what you're doing is you're making it easier for you to become more relational with yourself and with other people. So that's just one way, all of the things that I discussed can potentially help that.
Thank you. And I would come into agreement with that. Thank you so much, friend. When you
Pleasure.
were talking about even, simply sleeping or eating well or not having
Yeah.
clutter in my home.
Yeah.
And I think as a child with a tremendous amount of trauma and ACEs, that's what inspired me to become an Aloha ambassador for Choose Love.
Cool.
But it seemed backwards to me in the beginning, if that makes sense, that, I was so completely dysregulated that I didn't care to sleep. And I was like, why do I have to focus on 8 hours of sleep? Why do I have to eat leafy greens? But then when I started feeling physiologically better, and you said it, you said your body kind of leads the soul, right? The mind and the
Yeah.
heart. And it also leads you spiritually. And I was able to get into a better space when I had the better sleep and the leafy greens and the grounding.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Absolutely.
lots of great intel. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure. I appreciate you sharing it. There's some research that suggests that just 2 days of like 6 hours or less of sleep can actually dysregulate your immune system by 60%. So
Wow.
imagine just 2 bad days of sleep in a row, and now your immune system is dysregulated. And remember that slide, when your immune system is dysregulated, your stress mechanism is turned on through the language of inflammation. So it was no joke when I was saying sleep lowers inflammation, and that's the reason why. So it's kind of like you have to get a foothold. Is the foothold I'm just going to drink water? Is the foothold I'm focusing on shifting my cleaning products? Is the foothold I'm going to focus on just my diet? I'm going to focus just on therapy. You have to start somewhere. And then like once you get that foothold, then you can start prying open that door and allowing whatever needs to come out, and whatever needs to be reorganized to be reorganized.
So much good knowledge. And this lay is for you. I'm sorry you can't smell it or experience it.
I love
but I
it.
brought for
I'm going to
you.
take a look. Oh, I love it. Thank you so much. Oh, it's so pretty. Oh, I bet it smells so good.
Divine, divine. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mahalo.
Mahalo. Cool. All right, let me see. Sometimes we are not good at doing this. It says, yeah, by helping others. Yeah, it's funny. Shay, it says by helping others and serving others, by taking care of ourselves. I actually read a study once that said, I have to remember what it said. It said something like, again, regarding the immune system, when you do something nice for someone else, your immune system, elevates in its functional capacity or something like that. I don't remember what it was, but it's kind of cool. I'm a science nerd, so the science of it is really what gets me so excited. But it really is cool when you read papers that say, when you walk through a forest, they did a study of people walking through the forest with anxiety and depression, and then they tested blood levels of something called natural killer cell, NK cell. And a natural killer cell is basically it's a surveillance white blood cell that looks for and targets pathogens in your body. So people who spent time in the forest had elevated levels of natural killer cell, right? So spending time in the forest improves your immune system. It improves your ability to surveil your environment. And isn't that interesting? Not just internally, right? When you're spending time in a forest, isn't that what you're doing? Right? So I always say your internal landscape, we just mirror the world. Who said that? Was it Gandhi? I think it was Gandhi. He said, we but mirror the world. And so it really is biologically, as you are examining the forest, biologically, your immune system cells are more effectively scrutinizing for invasion, for pathogens, for whatever. So there's really something to it.
I looked up really quickly hugs, and it says there's researchers from Carnegie Mellon that say hugs help protect against stress and infection. They increase your level of oxytocin.
Yum. That's
Um,
the good stuff.
That's the long lasting good stuff. I had
Yeah.
a question,
Yeah.
like when you use your cell phone, I feel like we're getting to be this, I call this a crack pipe. I know that's not good analogy, but I feel like we're turning into addicts that want this quick dopamine fix.
Yes.
Social media, every time you get a like, you get a dopamine hit, and it feels good. And I feel, anybody who's heard me speak said, hears me say that we just want to feel good, and we do it in a good way. You've been talking about good choices, or we do it in some not so healthy ways by having a glass of wine, or taking at the extreme, doing drugs. Yes. And conflict and joining gangs and things like that. Yep. So we have this need for dopamine, and how do you think we can adjust? I mean, even like Amazon, it's like, wait, my package hasn't gotten here in 24 hours. Like, I'm so upset. Everything is so instant. Right at our fingertips, right here, information. We're information seekers. Now we get pushed information all day long. I call this front row tickets to the worst of humanity. How, Nadine, are we going to be able to adjust? Because we know that, say, relational
exposure.
The exposure, like you get the dopamine, but you also get the serotonin, the oxytocin, the endorphins, which are longer lasting.
Yes.
It feels good, but it's not like a hit that you need to get again. When we're in person, we have this. When we're in nature, when we're making good choices, how do we make the shift from, and it's hard for me too, like, yeah. I know I shouldn't look at the news, and I know you're not supposed to pick up your phone first thing in the morning, and I'll go, I know I shouldn't do it, and then I pick it up and I do it, It's like so frustrating. And not just the phone, but how do we make that shift into really appreciating the longer lasting feel good neurochemicals?
Well, that's a very difficult question.
Why I know.
Such a difficult question. That's like the
because
answer
I don't
to humanity, right?
I know. I'm sorry to put you on the spot because I don't really have the answer either. And we all need it.
Here's the thing, right? Is that like the young kids that are doing that, the dopamine hit, for an example, right? If they don't know what it feels like to get a hug, if they don't know what it feels like to be in love, if they don't know what it feels like to be relational, then like this is the next best thing, right? So it's kind of like the animal that's born in the zoo. They don't really know what it's like to live out in nature. So they're kind of just dealing with the next best thing. And are they living their best life? No. So the best thing that we can do as the adults, in the people that are quote unquote running the show, so to speak, is to create culture that fosters that. That's part of why I do what I do for a living, is that we need to be aware of the way that our brains are being hijacked by the culture that we are a part of and have been born into and have participated in creating, right? So we came into it, but we're also propagating it by being a part of it. Now, Scarlett, you and I have talked about, I think we have talked about in the past, how there are, neuroscientists who are working with marketing specialists to very consciously create commercials and create marketing campaigns that relate to children on Saturday morning when they're eating their cereal, that they need this toy, that they need this item, that happiness is outside of themselves. We are consciously hijacking children's brains. These phones are very purposefully addictive. There are neuroscientists who are hired to promote, how can we make this game promote the dopamine release? And there are EEG studies, and I mean, it's a very complex, intentional hijacking of our biological systems. And so, I mean, some days I'm like, why do I do this? This is a losing war. And, it does very much feel that way some days, because we're in such a stew, right? Of seasoning and flavoring and all of these things that are working against the very thing that we're trying to achieve here. And so the best thing that we can do, that we can hope for, is to do it for yourself as an individual and experience it, make it part of your life, and then share it with the people around you, share it with your community. Like I said, make that effort to talk to your community members, make the effort to try to make somebody smile, to engage with someone, to engage with someone in a relational way. And from the individual perspective, it does require a certain level of discipline, and that level of discipline, underlying that level of discipline, there's a level of self-worth that has to be fostered. You have to want it. It's work. And that's why I do feel sometimes like I'm fighting a dying war, a losing war, because people, it's so much easier to blame it on genetics, to say, well, I can just do whatever I want, and when I get sick, I'm just going to take this pill, and I'm just going to blah, blah, blah. Everything is, I don't have to deal with my trauma. I don't have to deal with my choices. I don't have to deal with my behaviors. I don't have to deal with the guilt of my choices, of my actions, of my reactions. I can just keep moving forward. It's easier, isn't it? So much easier.
To be a victim, but it doesn't feel good.
Well, I mean, it doesn't feel good, but those are folks that don't necessarily know how they could feel better. You know what I'm saying?
That's true. That's true.
So
isn't disease less than 1% genetic?
Oh, I don't know what the percentages are, but the story that I like tell is that genetics are about 70% of the, is it 70% or 30% of the equation, right? That you're given these genetics, and genetics are just a light switch, on or off, on or off, on or off. So what's the environment that you're putting that genetics in? Is it alcohol every night? Is it an abusive relationship? Is it a stressful job? Is it dysfunctional behaviors and patterns of thought? Is it emotional repression? That is the number one thing that we see in consistency with cancer diagnosis and emotional repression. So yes, environment is very, very much plays a role in whether or not that genetic predisposition comes to fruition or not. So, and like I said in the beginning of the talk, these diseases have skyrocketed in the past half a century or so. So think about, like, from World War II until about now, 70 years or so, 50 to 70 years. Look at the culture and how dramatically the culture has changed since that time. Around World War II, that's when women were brought into the workforce. Women going into the workforce really shifted the level of familial stress on the family, right? Now you have a double income home. You have a shift in the dynamics of caregiving and how caregiving is coming into play. There's been a shift in dynamics of how we treat our grandparents and our elderly people. There used to be a time where everybody lived together, right? And grandparents played a part in raising children. And so they felt more relevant, right? They played a role. They felt more relevant in their existence. They helped the parents in some of the day-to-day activities, the daily activities of living, like laundry and child rearing and maybe cooking, while mom and dad went to work. That's just one example, right? But also the stresses of the work economy, right? There used to be a time where fathers had something like 40 free hours in the week to spend at home with their children, with their families, with their friends. That number is now 4. The average father has about 4 free hours to spend. And they say, like, parents spend about 5 minutes on average per day of meaningful interaction with their children. 5 minutes. So how are our children getting their emotional needs met? They're not. And so what's the next best thing? It's the phone, right? The next best thing is, I mean, whatever is put in front of you, or your friendships, or your sports activities, or, you know, sadly, it turns into addictions. You know, if you ask any addict, what were you gaining from your use of this drug or use of that drug or use of this whatever? It doesn't have to be a drug. It could be shopping. It could be sex. It could be overworking. A lot of people will say, I get relief. I feel happier. I feel warm, love. You know, a lot of heroin users will report heroin. When you push heroin, it really gives you the feeling of warmth and you know, what kind of person is looking for that? It's someone who's missing that. So a lot of what we talk about in this particular conversation is having the compassion of understanding that everything we do is adaptive, including becoming addicts. We're looking for something when we begin that journey, right? When you meet an addict in the middle or the end of their journey, that nobody like says, hey, when I grow up, I want to be an addict. You know, that's not their intention. Their intention was, they kind of got out of control. Their intention was, I'm looking for a little bit of warmth. I'm looking to have a little bit of relief from whatever I'm hearing in my head, these dysfunctional thoughts. I'm looking for peace. I'm looking for, you know, maybe when I use, I like myself a little bit better. I think I'm funny. You know, they're looking for love in all of its iterations. I think I digressed a little bit. So the idea is we have to promote it in our lives and in the lives of others. We have to be active. We are at a point in in history where action needs to be taken, right? There's a time where you can be passive and enjoy what's being served, and there's a time where it's a call to arms and we have to rise and say, hey, you know, we have to put some regulation in if we want this earth to continue to be. You know, if we don't have an earth to live on, none of this really matters. So some of the things that need to be prioritized need to be prioritized. And that's just one of them. We discussed kind of a few of them, but you know, the phone is a really wonderful tool as long as you have the ability to be disciplined around it. And you have the ability to say, my worth doesn't come from that like. My sense of self-worth doesn't come from that thumbs up or that whatever, you know, and it's difficult, you know, especially for folks like us, right? Who you have a business, you feel like you don't want to promote it online because you don't want people using their phones, but at the same time, how do you exist in the world without it? It's very challenging.
Yeah, I think the key here is that it takes effort. You know, it's not a pill.
It's an active effort.
Yeah, it's not a law. We have to take personal responsibility for what's going on in our own lives. And I'm always saying in our communities.
100% in our communities. I'm reading this awesome book right now called Connections. And it's all about how, like, if you are friends with friends who smoke, you're more likely to be a smoker. If your friend's friend is like a bodybuilder, you're more likely to be a bodybuilder. Like, it's like we're intraconnected in ways that it's funny, we're just learning scientifically, but that has been evident in wisdom, ancient wisdom, for thousands and thousands of years. You know, when you look at the way birds fly together or the way fish move together in a school, there's some neurological intraconnectivity that we all possess. And we've all seen it, right? They did a study like if you start smiling, Scarlett, I'm more likely to smile. And then this person is more likely, for no reason. We have no reason why. We don't know why. But the idea is being, extending goodness, extending love into your community, into every interaction that you come upon, it has the ability to shift over time. You know, and just like I said, I get discouraged too. Sometimes I say, why do I even do what I'm doing? Nobody even wants it. You know, I have clients, the first thing out of their mouth is, how long do I have to do this for? You know, how much longer until I can start smoking my cigars again? You know, it's like, it's a lifestyle. And so there are days where even I get discouraged, but you just have to keep putting the best pieces of yourself out there. And hopefully over time, you know, there will be regulations and there will be political shifts and laws and stuff. Right now, it is individualized. It is a personal decision. But even just recently, I just read an article that said the Surgeon General finally put out a report that said social media or cell phone use in a certain age may actually be detrimental, because we're starting to see, well, we've been seeing that it does disrupt neurological development. And so, you know, these little first, second, third graders, kindergartners, preschoolers who went through the pandemic with the phone in front of their face because their parents were scrambling to work. I don't hold it against anybody. I get it. It was a very difficult time, but these kids are having behavioral problems in school. They're having trouble socializing. They're having trouble, you know, understanding authority. And I've spoken to many teachers and principals who have said to me, what can I do about this? What can I do about this? And, you know, it's a matter of educating everybody, because parents wouldn't have done that if they knew that that was not safe, right? Now we know these things. You know, Surgeon General's putting out these warnings. It's just a matter of time before, you know, hopefully there's some regulation. So that's all we can hope for, is just keep putting the best bits of yourself out there in the hopes that, you know, you make a old grumpy guy smile. That's a day. Call it a day, you know. If you could just make that grumpy guy on the corner smile, that's a good day.
You know, I've been reading this incredible book called Wonder Drug, and I took a leadership course, and I know I've been talking to everybody about it. And the amazing thing about that book, and I'll just share this because I want to leave everybody on a high note. I mean, you know,
mine too depressing?
No. Okay, I want to shift away from no.
You know, I'm messing around with you, Scarlett.
A lot of educators on here, and you know, a lot of I feel like educators are on the front lines of everything that is happening in our society. All the issues come into the classroom.
That's right.
And the educators have are responsible for that. And it's never been more difficult than it is now. I could not be an educator, but I have dedicated my life to love and support you all. And I'm so appreciative of what you do. This book is the first time that all of the research for compassion has been put into one place. And I thought it was so interesting because we started our professional development during COVID when schools were coming to us and saying, hey, we need help. And the first thing that they asked for was self-care for teachers. So we did some self-care stuff, and teachers really did deserve it. But after a while, it started to kind of feel, this is the feedback across the board, not really to us, but across the board that I've heard, like, okay, self-care. Now I have to do self-care on top of everything else. Like, this is one more thing that I have to do, and you're putting it on me. And it's true, it kind of was. And this book is saying that actually the research behind compassion in action, which is our last character value in the formula for choosing love, is we think about self-care and there's been a lot of talk in the chat box about putting your oxygen mask on first. And Nadine, you were talking about modeling, which is so important. But a lot of the way that we think about it in society is basically escapism, right? Okay, got to get away from my source of stress. Say it's the classroom, and I need to go on vacation. I need to spend time at home. I need to, have the glass of wine or, whatever, whatever. And the interesting thing is that the research does not support escapism being helpful at all. The research supports this, and this is so amazing. And this is where we get back to just who we are as human beings and the light of humanity in each one of us. The research supports that when we have this feeling like, oh, I got to care less about these kids because, and that is empathy burnout, right? I got to care less. I can't get too close. There's just so much need. I can't take care of it all. I can't take it all on myself. And I get that, but the research on compassion, remember, compassion and empathy, parts of the brain, shows that actually, if you lean in to your job with kids or whatever you're doing and care more, that and I always say, of course, the nurturing, healing love that you give, you get back in health and well-being and hope. And it's counterintuitive to what we've been taught by our society. It's like, what? So instead of moving myself away, you're telling me I've got to do more of what I've already been doing that's wearing me out? Yes, because that's what all the research shows leads to greater health, happiness, joy, well-being, on just in every aspect. And that's so beautiful. It's really just getting back to who we really are as human beings. And this is what you've been talking about, Nadine, like taking a walk in the woods and what that actually does to our bodies. We know that earthing, taking off our shoes and actually connecting with the ground and the grass. Actually, last time I did that, I got stung by a bee. But I am, now I don't walk in the grass. I sit and I look around and I place my feet in there. But it's just, that is that longer lasting feel good neurochemical release. That's where we're supposed to be. And I do believe that's really what we want. And if we knew better, we would do better. And so that's really our responsibility. Nadine and me and everyone on here to spread that message and to give people hope.
Oh, that was amazing.
It was so great. Thank you so much for tonight. I mean, I think everybody is thank you.
It was great. Yeah, it was great. I am very grateful for all of your attention. It's kind of hard sometimes to do a Zoom, because I don't get to see all of your beautiful faces and, people nodding or disagreeing, but hopefully you enjoyed it and had a good time. And if you have any more questions or you want to ask like a personal question, I do have my email up here. Let me see if I can share that with you. Here's my email address, and that's my website. If anyone is interested in like seminars for your school or your organization, you can reach out. But it was a pleasure meeting all of you and talking with all of you, and hopefully you feel more prepared to choose love after tonight's talk. Oops.
That was so beautiful. Thank you, everyone, so much.
Thank you.
Love to everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Judy. Totally. Thanks, Dawn. Thanks, everyone.